All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll give a quick minute for everyone to connect in and log in. We've got should be a record attendance this evening. Tonight has certainly struck a chord. So let me kick things off, guys, as we are recording, and this is a great continuing education course. First of all, for those of you that have not joined one of our Cirrus CEs, we are live. So the Q&A is open. Let us know what part of the country you're in. You can throw that right into the chat. If you haven't joined us before, we here at Cirrus try to put together and get some of the very diverse and some of the best accredited speakers across all of North America. And tonight is certainly no exception. The uniqueness of tonight are all members are here because of one man, Mr. Mark Gaylord, who is the Chief Executive Officer of and founder of the Dental Advisory Board. If you don't know what the Dental Advisory Board is exactly what doctors are looking for today. Mark assembled a really unique group of dental specific services that bring together leading advisory firms to support the practice owners from start to finish, and to make sure that across the country, Mark leads all strategic direction, partnerships, education for all business leadership and dentistry. If you don't know about Mark's background, Mark had worked as the COO and senior executive level within mid-market and consolidator industry. So he was on the DSO side. He knows what buyers are looking for. He knows the challenges of sale, and he's seen the firsthand challenges of financial, operational, and leadership challenges that are, in some cases, crippling some of the modern dental organizations. So his background, that it be business development, practice operations, executive coaching, and did a really interesting talk as one of the volunteers and board members for the Women of DSO. Mark, thank you so much for joining us this evening, sir.
Hey, it's great to be here, and it's great to be with my colleagues on the Dental Advisory Board, which I'm proud to say we are the largest PSO professional services organization in the country, which is literally the A to Z of the services that dentists need to do the business of dentistry so that they can enjoy the success and appreciate, focus on what they want to focus on, which is the clinical. And we are there to support them, whether it's someone like yourself, Eric, on lease negotiation, with Hanny on one of our lawyers on the legal team. It's literally, I tongue in cheek say it all the time, graduation to the grave are the professional services that you'll need to take you from the beginning of your career, whether you're looking for your first practice, whether you're scaling or you're looking to sunset and exit out. And I think that's part of the focus on where we are going tonight is what does that journey look like? And where are you on that timeline? And what type of, saleable clinic have you put together over the years? Because often we become blinded by the law of familiarity. We think things are going well just because that's how it went yesterday. We all know that insanity wheel that people find themselves trapped in. It was very interesting. Thank you for mentioning Women in DSO, which took place prior to the ODA this week. I was asked to speak and talk about culture and talk about how practices grow. And there were two of the largest DSOs who shall be left nameless. We all know who they are in the room at the time. And God bless them all. The C suites were sort of at the top of the food chain. And they all boasted, the C-suite went around, they all boasted what great cultures they had, how the organization was people focused. And I get that. I think at the end of the day, these are the type of things that we're trying to create. But is that a true thing? So where I disrupted the apple cart during that conversation was I thought, you know what, this group hug is wonderful, but if we're talking about true culture, it's not just the cliche, it's not just the mission statement on the back wall, but are your people, and even if you're a solo practitioner, do they truly know your vision? Do they truly know your values? And do they live it and believe it every single day? Now, we would
So we're
like
gonna
to,
dig in. We're gonna dig into all that, Mark, and you're
yeah,
bang on with it and perfect timing. I just want to do a quick introduction as well to Hanny Altajani, who's also speaking tonight, founder, lawyer, Emerge Law Professional Corporation, is a Toronto-based law firm specifically for corporate transactionals for dentists. So the two of you have done lots of deals together, and on the 11th hour of the 11th hour of the 11th hour, hopefully the next deal is going to close. But Hanny's a huge resource tonight, really helping to structure things about corporate structuring, shareholder arrangements, equity compensation, regulatory compliance, business acquisitions and exits, and beyond. So, as a practicing Ontario lawyer, always talking to dentists about corporate governance, all the shareholder dynamics, and most importantly, how to mitigate some of those risks. So, Hanny, thanks so much for joining us as well, sir.
Thank you, Eric, for the wonderful introduction. I'm looking forward to talking to everyone today.
Perfect. So I created a quick poll. Again, we're live, guys. It looks like 82% lease right now. Roughly 30% are looking to stay where they are. Another 12% are thinking of transitioning in the next 5 years, now 18%. And another 9% looking to acquire, and another 18% looking to open a clinic, just to give us a quick sense. So we are live. Feel free to throw in some Q&A as we go, and appreciate everyone's time. We're going to keep things upbeat. We're going to have some great Q&A as we go, as well as the end. Quick disclaimer for all our CEs. We are accredited by the AGE in terms of a nationally approved PACE provider. Give us about 10 business days to process it. And yes, conflict of interest statement. I am the CEO and owner of Sirius Consulting Group. Uh, so yes, in terms of this, so Mark, I think where this is interesting, by the way, we were just joking behind the scenes that it does look like Mark is now Saturn right around the rings of the universe. So Mark, it's key. So
Thank you.
Mark, let's dig in a little bit more to that culture piece and talk about the sort of operational reality. So you've been involved with a ton of these practice sales, some of which are more rushed than others. And as you were stating earlier, we're not selling a bushel of apples. And I know a lot of
Mhm.
doctors, it's just like a will and estate planning, Hanny, where, all just await or, oh gosh, I don't want to think about the common disaster clause and I'm just going to wait, install, and delay. I was victim of that many times prior to buying the business. And, it's not until you sort of rip the band-aid off and just say, just get it done. But, Mark, from your perspective, let's dig in a little bit deeper again as to why and where some of the valuations fall through. What are some of the challenges, and really digging in a little bit further into that. Heaven forbid something were to happen to the doctor. How
Mhm.
do we create that culture, the people, and make sure that, that legacy continues on post emergency exit, heaven forbid.
Heaven forbid. And thank you for that introduction. And I'm very passionate, as you can tell, about this topic. I'm very passionate about our industry and being part and a conduit to strengthening our industry and to doing it collectively and abundantly. And that's one of the reasons why we formed the Dental Advisory Board. So you had the top individuals, the top key performers in each one of their verticals in order to serve you and to better provide dental service, business service right across the board. Uh, and to the point that we all joke about earlier is not only is selling a clinic not like selling a bushel of apples, or if you're selling multiple clinics are growing, it's a strategic process. And often Hanny and I have done a number of deals together where I think at the beginning, the mindset is very transactional, especially with perhaps a legacy dentist who's practiced for 35, 40 years. And once they get into it, and I want everybody to remember this part of it, as much as this is transactional, it becomes very emotional because people start to realize that this is their whole life's work, this is their complete identity, and we like to talk in white glove and help mastermind around that. And also when you're considering perhaps selling your practice or even scaling, how are they evaluated? There's really three tiers of valuation in our industry, whether it's through the broker route, which will give you, we all know the top brokers in the industry, a letter of opinion, if you will, a broker's valuation on what they feel the market value of your clinic is. So the market value is much different than perhaps when we start talking about that DSO world, which whether it's not, it's a beautiful thing or it's a taboo thing to people. I think a lot of people are still on the fence because they haven't embraced it fully to understand what that brings to the industry. But the we start talking about a multiple value versus a market value. What is the actual cash value of this clinic? And then, pre-COVID, we were looking at numbers that were astronomical, 12, 13 times that multiple. I think now it's a little bit more reasonable around the seven, anywhere 7 to 8.5. And the other big difference too was back in those days, an entry level clinic may have had 250,000 to $500,000 of EBITDA times that larger multiple. And now when we start looking at the corporate situation, that entry level is actually elevated and the multiples actually come down. But to get into that space, when you're looking doctors at, am I going to sell privately through the market value, through a broker, or working with someone like Hanny and I to bring you value for your clinic, it's a completely different valuation and number than what the DSOs are looking for. So you've got market value, and then you've got your multiple value. So your market value is the value of the clinic, the value of your goodwill, the depreciated value of your equipment, what have you. And at the end of the day, and the DSOs will correct me because it's a bigger statement, but it literally comes down to the number. What does that cash flow look like, and what is the multiple times that cash flow? And it's sometimes things that people don't consider, and they need to take pause because when you start talking about an exit, this isn't something that should be thought out 6 months or a year prior. This is something that we should start looking at 3 years out. Because when you look at the banks will always look at the track record, the historical value of your clinic. So how do I proof my clinic? How do I grow my clinic over the next 3 years to give it the maximum value? Is this when I bring in a consultant? Is this when I reevaluate my staff, my culture? Because all these things sort of bubble to the surface as we start evaluating clinics. Stuff that
And
we
it's in,
need. Sorry, go ahead,
sorry to
Eric.
interrupt, Mark, but it was interesting because when we were on with Tala, Dentala Consulting last month, there's a ton of dental practices that, Hanny, we're probably talking to you and talking to you, Mark, et cetera, about, what's my clinic worth in the heyday of COVID? And then suddenly, well, hang on a second. You mean to say if I increase my production by 5%, 10%, if I ramp up my hygiene, if I refer less out, I can go from a $1.5 million valuation to a 2.5 with that much relative effort?
Mhm.
So, yeah, Mark, do you want to sort of expand on that a little bit of what so many clinicians are doing now to sort of raise value in between looking at where their valuation was and saying, gosh, I'm not ready to retire. My wife would kill me, or husband for that matter,
Husband, yeah.
right? You want to touch on that briefly?
Yeah, so I think that you need to be very prudent because I've talked to multiple doctors that have a number set in their head. My practice is worth X, and sometimes it boggles my mind of where did this number even come from? How do we adjudicate the facts to get to that number? So it often makes sense to have someone come in and do a high level overview of your clinic, almost like a full mouth exam of the clinic, a diagnostic exam of all things and that would lead to evaluation. And this is where we bring in our experts on the clinical business side, on the consulting business side. They do a full diagnostic evaluation of your clinic to give you a very good idea where you're at and what it's going to take to increase the value of your hygiene, of your overall production, to lower your accounts receivable. Because once these numbers all come together, that's where we end up with our final valuation number.
Perfect. The other big questions here, again, the Q&A is open. I see a few ones coming through. I see people coming through, mostly Ontario, a few British Columbia, Alberta, Maritimes. Great to see everybody, my old alma mater. The other big question we get all the time, Mark, is the especially if, right, the doctor's thinking of selling within the next 2 years or 5 years. First of all, as soon as you usually start thinking, sooner or later, that just gets to be a larger and larger piece. But can you run through the trends and some of the differences these days to say, gosh, I'm doing $1 million, I've got four operatories, I'm in, XYZ, Ontario. Can you walk us through what that looks like from a broker, from a corporate, and or private sale, Mark, at a high level?
100%. So, first of all, doctors today, to maximize the value of your clinic and to maximize the production within your clinic, it's sort of that Costco model of keeping as much in-house as possible. Gone are the days of the referral. I often joke with a dentist, if you're referring out you can expect a Christmas basket. If you're keeping it in house, you can expect 40% of that specialty production in your chair on a specialty day. So more and more in that 3 year period out, we're looking at clinics and offering them to bring in oral surgeons on a twice a month basis. You can have $60,000 days in production. That changes the bottom line dramatically. To bring in an orthodontist on a rotating basis within your clinic, or if you're providing orthodontic care within your clinic, this creates a higher level of production, which again increases the multiple. It also is patient centric. Patients don't want to be referred out anymore. And I don't want to upset any of the referred doctors, but anywhere we go nowadays, we want to have a one stop convenient service. And if you can provide that in your office, not only is it going to help build the culture and the strength of the current patient base, but the production is by default going to go up astronomically.
On that note, just we'll cover a lot of the Q&A in the end, but one that did come up just for the middle. Mark, what are you seeing now? Everybody wants to know multiples and multiples of EBITDA, normalized EBITDA, but very high level. The question was, what are the current DSO multiples for specialty clinics, in particular pediatric? We're seeing a lot more pedo ortho, right? Sort of combination pieces. Your thoughts on DSO multiples and DSO
Mhm.
multiples on specialty.
Okay, so we'll look at the DSO multiples first on the general practice. Right now, I'm working with a couple of the larger DSOs. I'm seeing anywhere from an entry level point of 7 times to as high as 8.5 times. Now, I've heard stories of 10. I've never seen it myself, but I think realistic is somewhere within that metric. Now, here's don't shoot the messenger on the specialty lane. If it's a strong perio clinic, I'm seeing interest in the DSO space. But DSOs prefer not to buy into lease or real estate. They're looking for general practitioners that they can keep on for a long period of time. They're keeping as much dentistry in house as possible. So there have been a few occasions where we've transacted with specialty clinics, but it's not the main flow and the main objective of the DSO at this stage.
Understood. Perfect. Uh, Perfect. We'll run through some more Q&A as we go through. Very high level is the reason why we're all passionate about this is because, first of all, my godfather, and when I was quite young, tore his rotator cuff, could no longer practice wet finger dentistry. So I was always advised to get in the business side of medical dentistry and proud owner of Cirrus, which has been around for over 33 years and has done over 13,000 of these types of lease situations. Bottom line is know your facts, know the data, and to Mark's point, have the plan. I would argue 5, if not even 10 years prior is the best time to get a sufficient term and options and the lease. But the data really goes a long way. Let it be Mark and Haney involved on an M&A side. Really nice to know what do we know about the landlord? What do we know about the other tenants in the building? What do the demographics look like? And where does that market rent fall, and how much of a premium or not are we paying today? When we ask this, right, Hanny, I'll put you on the spot. I always ask this in our CE courses, but what is a lease? What does a lease mean to you as a lawyer? But what does it mean to you when you say what's a lease?
Great question. I would say it's what defines the relationship between the tenant and the landlord. And you have things on paper. So in case a tenant wants to leave, if there's any breaches or anything, we go back to the actual lease. So the relationship between the tenant and the landlord.
Very good. From my non-legal perspective, I say it's a check.
It's a check.
It's a
It's a check.
check,
I
right?
like that better.
But it's pretty interesting when you look at Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, etc. You look at the average clinic that's spending $5,000, $6,000 a month, plus common area maintenance, plus HST, etc. You look at that over the 10, 15, 20 plus years, and it will be the largest check that you will sign in your personal or professional lives to one single entity. With that being said, right, if you were about to sign a check to any entity, especially for $2 million, would you not want to make sure that you've squeezed out every penny? Do you not want to make sure that the terms are correct, right? And that you haven't just signed something on the trunk of a car, right? And sort of get locked into something without truly realizing the leverage. So, as we look towards emergency exits, and there have been probably at least a half dozen situations where the doctor's private plane crashed, the doctor had a devastating aneurysm and died the same day after having a headache, to one that had a massive heart attack and needed to, transfer the clinic right away. One of the first things in terms of the basics are, squeezing as much as you can, keeping the overhead as low as possible. So again, base rents, annual increases, common area maintenance, fixturing, it goes on and on. But in any lease renewal, please, doctors, do not just exercise your next 5-year term. You want as long a term as possible. You want as many options to renew as you can, because now the banks dictate the terms. The banks are giving the
100%.
2 million, $3 million loan to you or your potential buyer. And if there isn't at least 12 years worth of term on the lease, they will not give you 12 years worth of term on the loan. So, because practice valuations are so high, they'll spread the loan over 12 years. But if there's any sort of demolition, relocation, etc., that all goes to the wayside. Hanny will dig into this a little bit more in terms of how to structure things, but ultimately ask yourself the question. Quick, brief pad of paper for those of you that are calling in. This is the what you're seeing on the screen. Who owns the building? Is it yourself, your spouse, your corporation? Who owns the practice? Is it yourself, right? Corporation, spouse, etc. And then asking the question, are you paying yourself rent today? Number four is how are you tracking those business expenses? Is there any sort of lease or document, to Hanny's point, right? What dictates the difference? Wow, Hanny, come on. I'm paying from one pocket to the other. I'm my own landlord. It's great. I don't know. What do I need a lease for? Right. And then the big question is, to the relevance of today is, if you do sell and you own the building, do you want to keep the real estate as a passive form of income? And my personal perspective, and there's lots of opinions, but my view is that no different than a will and estate plan. If you've got a clean lease structured to be very landlord friendly today, it's that much easier for Mark to turn around, sell the clinic from Dr. A to Dr. B by saying, look, here's the lease. Here's exactly how we've been paying ourselves, and I'm just transferring it from us to you, and you take it and run with it. Versus, oh no, we were underpaying ourselves. We want to charge you twice rent. We want to make it a triple net lease. We want to change all the financials. And it just, again, it changes the whole pitch. And one of the biggest reasons why a practice deal dies at the 11th hour is the stupid
Still
lease.
lease.
So
Yes.
give yourself a little rate of the state of the estate. Same but different. Buyers. I don't know what it is going on in the dental schools or even the DSOs. Everybody wants ground floor, retail, grocery anchored, lots of natural light, right? 15 to 2,200 square feet, room to grow, three operatories, expanding to five, plumbed for five. It's just, it's truly unbelievable what that desire is, which is great. But a lot of those spaces are only leased unless we have $20 million to buy a grocery anchored, type of shopping plaza. But track the lease expiries and put that into your phone. The key dates are when does your lease expire, right? When is that option to renew deadline? And start having a plan and working with your accountant, your lawyer, and the other members of the dental advisory board, for example, to create a bulletproof plan to maximize those practice sale proceeds. A lot of doctors are unaware that their options might be personal to them. So
Mhm.
if your option means you have a 10-year term and the ability to renew your lease another 5 or 10 years, etc. If I'm selling to Dr. Dejani and the options are personal to Dr. Gaylord, there is, right, that does nothing for Dr. Al Dejani. So one of the key things to understand are what is hidden in the lease, right? Details matter. And if you haven't have it professionally reviewed, you may be shocked to find out that probably 60% of the leases we review on a monthly basis give the doctor personal liability or they've signed it personally, either as a guarantor or indemnifier or otherwise. Number six, I would say almost 95% of the leases we review, which is a few thousand every year, show that even after the doctor sells, they will still remain as personally and corporately liable post sale. And nothing drives a seller more nuts than thinking, gosh, I'm going to sell, but I still got to be on the hook for this indefinitely. Hanny, no way. Right. So don't wait until the last minute. And then the other kisses of death, unfortunately, lately are, or can be, shall I say, is the demolition and relocation. And just to address the elephant in the room, yes, the banks, some more than others, definitely don't like the risk that is posed to the buyer if there is a unilateral landlord right to terminate the lease or relocate them or even substantially redevelop. We did a webinar with Tier 3 recently. They will actually reduce the price of the clinic $350 per square foot, right, with that risk and then discount it back about 15% per year. So arguably having term and as much of it is a key thing, especially if you're $1 million plus producing clinic. If you're five, 600,000, then maybe it's just best to sell your charts. But if you are, call it $1 million plus, right, your practice is worth a lot more than the sum of its parts. And having a long-term lease that gives clear predictability and continuity of revenue is absolutely critical. Give yourself a quick rating of 1 to 10. Ultimately, what should it do? Fair and affordable terms, protecting yourself, protecting your family, and some exits, right? Flexibility is sort of a four-letter word at times, but there was a devastating example of a doctor north of our office who was 43 years of age, built at a beautiful six-operatory clinic, and 3 weeks prior to the grand opening died of a massive heart attack. Fully built out clinic, no doctor, no patients, right? We don't need Mark and Hanny to do the analysis to realize that unfortunately that clinic was worth zero, was actually less than zero. The bank got their pound of flesh from the life insurance policy. Unfortunately, the landlord went to the spouse and said, unfortunately, Mrs. Smith, you're now responsible for the roughly $9,000 a month, increasing at 4% per year for the remaining 9.5 years on the lease. So the reason why I chose, and this is pretty near and dear to my heart, is we want to protect ourselves. And if it is the largest asset that we're working so hard to do, and when we think, God, Mark, get me the hell out of this, sell it yesterday, right? The things we can do today and why we're screaming from the rooftops is had that doctor had some professional guidance, we could have added, and please add it to your notes, a death and disability clause, a dental specific death and disability clause that basically said, heaven forbid, something were to happen, the estate could wipe their hands, give 60 days notice, and exit, right? Because ultimately, if we can't sell or one of the partners dies, another situation we had in the GTHA where the partner died 50-50, and the partner's family was then making the decisions. The partner couldn't sell. They had to relocate. It was up for redevelopment. It was an absolute mess. So where Hanny will touch on is, what are some of the pieces, especially in partnership or shareholder agreements, to prepare yourself for what could be a really difficult situation. Good news, guys. We've extended tonight. We're going to run 5 hours straight, and we're going to go through each and every one of these clauses, Hannah. I'm kidding. But it's a great one to take a screenshot of. This is just some in the lease that is negotiable and could have hundreds of thousands of dollars of impact on your situation and your eventual sale. If you're unaware of some of these, there'll be a quick section here in a second. Whether you own your real estate or lease, there's pros and cons for each. Regardless, the lease still becomes an important component for both. When we talk about value, just to wrap on this key piece is, of course, it's equipment, the patience. But again, if there isn't term, if you're month to month, it is the riskiest situation to sell your clinic. To fix that as early as possible and have a long-term lease is key. I'll give one practical example. So this was pulled from a recent lease, and with the exception of Hanny, uh, have a look and try to look through some of these core red flags and see what the first thing that jumps out at you. Mark, what do you see first?
My brother, I'm going to get onto that page. You're
Where's
asking
my
an old guy.
glasses?
You're
Where's
asking an
my
old guy who
glasses?
didn't bring his glasses to the show. I
Well, I'll
apologize.
help out
I've
a little
actually
bit.
looked at this chart, so I should know this.
Yes. It is a bit of an eye chart, right? This is sort of the running joke, as they say in a CE course I did in Denver, is, okay, who likes reading leases? The short answer is that, look, if you don't know, you cannot sell your clinic without the landlord's prior written consent. Full stop. That's in almost every single lease. And is a real key element that don't wait till the last minute. Oh yeah, we've got to tell the landlord. Oh well, we'll just figure that out. Don't wait. Many leases.
Can I just
Yeah,
add
please,
proof
Mark.
to that? To proof to that story, Henny and I have
Please.
just finished that exact scenario where the seller thought, "Don't worry about it. The landlord is a friend. He's a patient. All good." So we've learned this was a learning for us as well. Take nothing like that at face value. Make sure you have it in writing, the extension on the lease, because it did come down to the 11th hour where the landlord was like, "No, I'm not signing this deal." And through multiple weeks of renegotiation, negotiation, we finally managed to rectify the situation. But it really threw a loop into the whole sales and the whole transaction.
And that's a great point because look, you might have a great sweetheart relationship with the landlord, but the second things change, and of course, everyone says, "Oh, my landlord doesn't plan to redevelop." And the counter argument then is great. They should have no problems putting that into writing to give your buyer that sort of assurance. And suddenly the landlord says, "Well,
Yeah.
I'm not planning on selling now, but if I get a $50 million check, doctor, you are toast." Right? But even here, so the landlord has built in a bunch of sort of really landlord friendly language. The landlord can say, "Yes, I approve, Dr. Gaylord. No, I do not." Or number three, I can even terminate the lease just for asking to sell. And imagine at the 11th hour having the landlord not only terminate the lease, you might be 1 year into a 10-year term. They, in some cases, can actually terminate it on the day of closing. And then what's stopping them from engaging directly with your buyer? And then, doctor, don't let me be the first to tell you, but how much is your clinic worth without the keys? With that being said, the other thing to always look out for is any sort of reference to raising rents or changing the terms, or again, I gave you a great deal, Dr. Alajani, but for your buyer, I want to bring it back to market price. That again can kill a deal because suddenly, hey, my overhead has just gone up X percentage. The last thing that we're seeing more and more of is landlords requiring money, cash, or in one cases, Henny, we saw in an assignment in Ottawa, the landlord actually putting in writing that they want just for their signature, one single signature, transferring the lease from seller to buyer. They wanted $35,000 cash plus HST just for the assignment from seller to buyer. And at the 11th hour, what did the seller do? Signed it, paid the big fee, and cursed and swore the whole time of how could I have let that happen to me? Lastly, at the bottom, consent, notwithstanding the landlord's consent. So even if they say yes, the landlord shall not be, or the tenant shall not be released from its obligations under this lease and shall remain liable for any failure for the tenant or its assignees or subtenants to observe each and every covenant. So bottom line, even after you sell, you will still remain as personally and corporately liable as you are today. There was a doctor that had attended our one of our Michigan courses, stood up, raised his hand at the end of the course, and said, "Guys, this just happened to me. I was in Florida. I'd retired. It was fantastic. I got the phone call from the landlord that my buyer vacated, was gone, did the midnight run. The landlord couldn't find him. Was 3 months behind in rent." Doctor said, "Well, hey, why is this my problem? I'm enjoying retirement here." And said, "Well, doctor, per your original lease from 1996, right, you are a personal guarantor and you are still, even as you transferred the lease, you are still responsible for that lease." And the doctor, who had already let his license lapse, had to get a locum, get his office manager back in, get the band back together, and had to reopen because it was not only the 3 months, it was the remaining 4.5 years on the lease. So as we structure through all of this piece, and as we get to Hanny's section here on the legal side, is starting early, 24 months prior to the lease expiry, 5 years or 10 years prior to your actual transition time frame helps to make sure you can purify your assets. We've done some great courses with MNP and some of the accountants on the dental advisory board and beyond. There's all sorts of key things to deal with, purification of assets and things to do today to talk to your accountant on. But definitely there are ways of selling your clinic in some cases for no tax. Or another example that we shared in a course in Ottawa recently, with doctor sold a $4 million clinic for no tax, and the other one paid almost $600,000 in tax. All about planning, structuring accordingly. How do you win? Number one, get all the facts. If you do not have a countersigned lease from your landlord, it isn't worth the paper it's written on. Number two, get all the goals, right? Think through the process. Ensure that there is where you're going, what your plans are. Have the lease professionally reviewed. Get the facts, rental rates, vacancies, comp reports, demographics. All that component is a key resource. Number five, come through that outcome strategy development, basically not stopping and understanding exactly that carefully choreographed game of chess. What have I not done at this point, Mark? I haven't picked up the phone and called the landlord. So please do not walk into the clinic tomorrow morning, skip steps 1 through 5, say I went to this great handy webinar and skip it. Then negotiate financials, then negotiate the business clauses. But do not stop until you get that final form lease that you're satisfied with. As I pass it over to Hanny to dig through that, a lot of you I see through the Q&A will answer those questions as well towards at the end or specifically for Hanny. We do waive all our fees for the complimentary lease review and rental rate analysis. And I'll pull up a quick poll for that as well for some curious pieces. Or if you're just thinking of having that transition conversation, happy to share and have a nice one-to-one call with you as well. It is my privilege to talk and pass it over to Hanny to dig through again with emerged law specifically. Hanny, you've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. From a legal and lawyer's perspective, let's talk about what we need to start to think of today to create that 5 year plus roadmap. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Eric. And Eric, I am curious. Right now, I'm a selling dentist and I'm looking at my lease and I'm like, damn, there's so many things that are wrong with this lease. What advice would you want to give them on how they can rectify it or amend it, or is it too late?
It's never too late. Great question. It's never too late. The first thing I would say is just don't just exercise your next 5 year option because like my kids, you're like walking the plank with the Pirates of the Caribbean, right? Every time you exercise another five, you need enough term for you and enough options to renew for your buyer. So one of the best ways to do it is doctors, if you're thinking of selling and you've got all these issues in it, and especially if your lease is coming up in the next 2 years, why don't we treat the next renewal as a new 10-year term? That gets the landlord to sort of hit the reset button, do a new lease, even a new standard form lease, 2 5 year options, and it creates a amazing end result. And yes, it's never too late to fix it. No different as it's never too late to help get the right legal structures in place for your corporation. Thank you, Annie.
Amazing. Thank you very much for sharing that, Eric. And that's the exact reason why I have it to start the work 5 years before the sale, because you never know what's going to happen. You want to have a little bit of time, especially if you have an option to extend. We can go to the next slide. I only have really the next slide as the main one. So hopefully this will cover most of the things. I kind of structured it in a way as the most questions I receive. And I want to start off by just saying when I get the file, the first thing I look at is your minute book. And so two things either come up. Number one, very unlikely, but there are some dentists that are still operating as sole proprietors and not as a corporation, not as a dentistry professional corporation. And in those cases, for you to qualify, if you want the capital lifetime gains exemption, you will need to incorporate. And there is a 24-month period where it's safe for you to be like, all right, if you do one, two, three, you can then access the capital lifetime gains exemption. The second thing I want to talk about with regards to your corporation and your minute book is a lot of dentists may have their spouse or their children as shareholders. So this is really important to note this with your accountant because you may want to redeem their shares right before the sale. You may want to know whether they're residents of Canada. I had a situation, this was maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. One of the shareholders was a son who was living, I think, in Barbados, and there is a tax rule that if someone holds shares that they're not a resident of Canada, there could be some complications and there could be some delays. And your accountant would do a much better job than me to explain that. But I just wanted to flag that for you guys because a lot of times dentists are like, all right, here's the shares. We don't think too much about it. But then when it comes to time to sell, these little details may make a huge difference. Now, Eric already talked a little bit about purification. I remember purification was a concept. I was like, okay, what exactly is it when I first started practicing? And generally speaking, it is an area that we do defer to the accountants, but it is something that every person on your team should know about, which is the best example to think about it is you're in school, you have a backpack, and you put all, let's say, your pencils, your notebook, everything that relates to your school. But as the years progress, you may want to put a comic book, you may want to put a soccer ball if a soccer ball fits, and then you want to sell the backpack. And then when you want to sell the backpack, anything that's related to school basically kind of has a benefit. Anything that's not, you may want to move it somewhere else. And your accountant will help you do that. But again, one of the biggest rules of thumb, even though I wrote this 5 years before, it's really 24 months if you really want to structure everything. So two things I also want to mention is sometimes accountants and lawyers may provide certain opinions, and I've seen this happen quite a bit when I get a client, it's like my accountant said this and said that, that may not necessarily align with what I've seen. My recommendation is always ask second opinions if you're unsure, and always ask for the opinion to be in writing as well. This way you can also have a record. So this is just kind of like a practical tip. Now, let's say we got the minute book. We tell you a little bit about purification. You speak to your accountant because your accountant is going to be the first person you want to talk to about this. Now, let's say you have a partner. Assuming there is no shareholder agreement, and then there's a shareholder agreement. If there's a shareholder agreement, fantastic. We just go to the shareholder agreement. We see what the mechanism is. We see the exit, what the fair market value, what the valuation would look like if, like, assuming the shareholder agreement was well drafted. Now, makes the exit a lot easier. Sometimes, if let's say two partners are not meeting eye to eye, then there are mechanisms in a shareholder agreement, like a shotgun clause, which I'll explain in a second, to basically trigger a sale. Because sometimes, ideally, two dentists or three dentists or multiple dentists are working together, and they're all going to decide like at some point they want to sell. And maybe one person's like, I'm going to buy the other shares, but maybe there's two dentists and one person wants to sell it at a certain price, and there's nothing in the shareholder agreement about the valuation. It stays silent. I can tell you that was not drafted by our merge law lawyers because that's one of the first things we put is how do you exit and how do you actually value the shares. In those circumstances, generally what we'll see in a shareholder agreement is a shotgun clause. And what that means is that you are going to offer the opposing or the other dentist basically an offer to buy their shares at X amount of dollars. Now, that other dentist will have the option to accept your offer or do an Uno reverse and be like, nope, I'm going to buy your shares. So by the end of it, one of you is going to sell. Again, this is assuming there's a shareholder agreement. Now, let's assume there is no shareholder agreement. In those circumstances, it really comes down to you guys having to figure out like a way to sell because you don't want to go through litigation. So we'd always recommend having mediation in those circumstances because you really there is no paperwork to really go and navigate that relationship.
So, Henny, maybe just on that vein, because we have seen it where two dentists, they got together. My dad was a prime example with another physician, but um, again, if one becomes incapacitated or if one has a debilitating illness or otherwise, where does that fit in, or what's some of the things you suggest with partners or group of partners to definitely help to not have to deal with their estate or be not be able to make decisions on behalf of the business if the partner passes away and their estate now becomes the decision maker?
Excellent question. So, and this is another reason why shareholder agreements are so critical and important for your business because this shareholder agreement will have language about things that trigger a sale, and one of them will be death and disability, right? And it's much better to negotiate at the start to be like, okay, what would that look like for either of us? If this were to happen, how would that sale look like? On that note, let's just assume there is no shareholder agreement. I guess actually we'll talk about the estates in a bit, so I'll save that in a second. But let me see what else we have in the shareholder agreement section. Yeah, so we've discussed the shareholder agreement, we've discussed the shotgun clause. Drag along and tag along essentially means like if you have multiple shareholders, you want to make sure that in the shareholder agreement there is there are clauses that will essentially trigger a majority sale. So let's say if you have more than two shareholders, let's say there's three or four of you, and the majority have decided you want to sell. So that one person can say, "Oh, nope, we cannot." That would be like a drag along. Like if the majority have now agreed, it was already in the shareholder agreement, it was already discussed. Absent this, the other shareholder can say, no, these are my shares. If you guys want to sell them, you can. Everyone owns their shares. And again, imagine there's three or four shareholders, but let's just say three shareholders, and they don't have a shareholder agreement. And then two of those people end up selling to two randoms that the existing dentist does not want to work with. There's nothing preventing them. It's their shares, right?
Or even worse, if one wants to sell or sell to a larger entity, and the bigger entity or corporate doesn't want just a third or two
Mhm.
thirds, they're stuck.
100%, 100%. I can't tell you how many stories I've seen and how many scenarios I've seen where there are more than one dentist working together and they started off as best friends with this huge vision and business happens and sometimes people don't see eye to eye and it just the exit becomes a little messy and we have to figure out how to navigate those relationships versus
Any
yeah, sorry.
sorry to interrupt. I was just feel free to complete that thought. Or there was a question that came through about the divorce. So speaking of relationships, how does that work with divorce? Sort of evaluation for the divorce. Any divorce best practices,
Yeah,
perhaps?
absolutely. And thank you for mentioning that. So I will say I've had a handful of deals in the past 12 months that the deal did not go through because of family status, aka when there's divorces. So there's two scenarios when we're going to talk about divorce right now. There's scenario number one is in the shareholder. Like you have two partners and one of them is getting divorced, and based on a court order, they want to have something called the equalization, and maybe they can sell the shares. Obviously, when it comes to uh, having a professional corporation that's regulated by the RCDSO, technically, they cannot have, let's say, like a non-dentist spouse cannot own those shares. But as one, let's assume they're this dentist, the spouse is a dentist, and then the second part is the court may order a sale just to ensure equalization. So that's number one. The second part is, and when let's assume shareholder agreement to the side. You want to sell your shares, and then there is a situation when there is a divorce. It's really important to consult a family lawyer. I'm not a family lawyer, so I cannot provide any advice on that. But I will say that I have seen so many deals fail because someone either specifically the seller is filing for divorce, and they know that if they were to get divorced, their spouse is going to get X amount, and it gets a little messy. Divorce can get a little messy. So if that is a possibility for you, my best advice is contact a family lawyer and have a consultation. And even if the family lawyer, if it's a fee, it's an investment. And I can't stress this can't
Mhm.
stress this enough, because if you are in the realm of possibly getting divorced, you should know one, all your rights and all your options. So that's with regards to divorce. Now I would like to just briefly talk about estates. So when it comes to the scenario, God forbid, something happens to you, what happens to your practice? So when it comes to the RCDSO, they don't actually put like a timeline, like you need to sell your practice in X amount of dates, but generally it's between 6 to 12 months is kind of like the expected. They have the language is I think it's reasonable time. I've I've seen on deals, brokers will say it's 90 days, but and I always have to double check with the RCDS. So I'm like, no, it's within a reasonable time frame. But regardless, you should always have a plan on what will happen if something were to happen to you. And this is not just to protect obviously the clinic, but it's to protect your family and your sta estate to make sure that there is a plan. And as Mark mentioned in the beginning, you never know what's going to happen. You can be very healthy, and then God forbid something happens. So always plan. I also now want to just briefly talk about non-competes. So non-competes is probably one of the most talked about things in the dental world, because I will say this, there's two different contexts for non-competes. There's the quasi-employment relationship where you're an associate and there's a non-compete, and then there's a non-compete when you sell your practice. In the circumstances when you're an associate and there's a non-compete in your agreement, I'm not going to give you a legal opinion to say this is enforceable or this is unenforceable, but courts have tended in the past to say like, hey, this could be a quasi-employment relationship and could be unenforceable. Some have said it's enforceable. So it really depends on the facts of your case and your exact contract as an associate. Now, if you sell a dental clinic and there's a non-compete, it is highly likely to be enforceable. And we've seen that in the past where dentists would sell a clinic and they'll be like, all right, this is then the radius is 5 kilometers. We're opening up a clinic 4.8. And they're like, no one's gonna say anything. They can't, no one really enforces non-competes, and they'll go aggressive. And yeah, they'll get sued. And I don't like getting these calls because I'd be like, I told you it's it's enforceable. But you don't want to be that dentist who sells the clinic and still contravenes the non-compete. But at the same time, if you are a buying dentist on the flip side, you still want to look at your non-compete to make sure, even if you're an associate currently, that you're not buying a clinic that contravenes that. Because whether it's enforceable or unenforceable, why risk going to court and paying all these legal fees where you could just prevent it by just going 1 or 2 kilometers a little farther?
As they say, the only ones who wins are the lawyers.
100%, 100%, 100%.
But
Like,
it's a good point, right? The reality in what I say is regardless of enforceability or not, how much is the opposing party, right? The principal dentist, how pissed off are they going to be, and how deep are those pockets to fight it tooth and nail? And if you're just opening your new clinic, do you really want that dark cloud and frustration? So our always guidance is if it's a 5 kilometer radius, go outside the 5 kilometers. I was with one of the Henry Schein team not too long ago. They had a doctor where the 5 kilometers of the radius was not Google Maps, it was as the crow flies. And it was actually where the line drew was outside of the front door. It literally drove, got through the clinic. And because the front door was just outside, it was okay. But it could have been, God knows how much the legal costs were. But it's exactly right. How do we prepare ourselves for it, and how do we avoid, right, the frustration, not just the end result?
And that's an excellent point, Eric, because sometimes, let's say a bigger dentist or a DSO are just going to go after you, one, to set a precedent, and two, just to make sure that this doesn't happen,
Mhm.
right? So this is a
Yeah.
risk you want to mitigate. And I will also say this with regards to non-competes. I had a client last week. She decided to build a clinic and she knowingly contravened or is contravening her non-compete with basically a dental clinic she's working with. And I asked her, I'm like, you do know this is contravening? She's like, no, but I spoke to a lawyer before me that said that this was fine. I'm like, do you have a legal opinion from this lawyer? Do you have something in writing? And this is my best advice to you, whether you're working with me or any other lawyer, is make sure you have it in writing from the lawyer as well. If they're providing you a legal opinion, and let's say you do contravene this non-compete and you get sued, you can't really say, oh yeah, this lawyer just told me this, because the lawyer can be like, oh, that's not what I meant. You misinterpreted it. But if you have a legal opinion in writing, you can definitely go back and you can even access their Law Pro insurance. Lawyers and accountants are insured for things like this. So I wanted to just flag that as just a practical tip. Whether you're working with an accountant or a lawyer, have things in writing. And this goes back right to the beginning as well. Um, I will also say this because Eric, you mentioned with regards to having, let's say, the landlord release the current tenant when they want to sell. This is the ideal scenario, and this is something why you have to work with Eric to make sure that you have that language in the lease to make sure that it's removed. But we're seeing this more and more that landlords want to still have the current tenant to still stay as an indemnifier
Guarantor.
for
Yeah.
like at least a year or two. Sometimes they'll say for the full term. My best advice for you is to keep the option of like, okay, if they really want us, put it for 12 months. We're good. After 12 months, then let's agree to release. And more importantly, when you are selling, make sure you have an indemnity agreement from the buyer saying like if something were to happen, at least they'll indemnify you. So it's still a way to mitigate the risk, but making sure that the deal still can close. And that's pretty much it with regards to the selling side from the law.
I, Eric, can I put you back right in the middle of this whole conversation? I think at the beginning you said there was a poll. There's about 18% of the group was looking to transition out eventually.
Yes.
And I don't know what the new doctors coming in to potentially purchase, but I think we've made a pretty strong case for the fact that if you're looking to sell, to have this meeting with you or have these leases reviewed and negotiated long before that sales term comes up. But even more importantly, with the new buyer, and I was at fault with this in the past until you and I started to work together. The first and only questions I got were, how much is the lease per month per square foot, and what's the TMI? That was good enough for any new buyer. And it's imperative that if you're going to be entering into a transaction, into a lease, you have someone like Eric protect you long term, not just to get this shiny object up and running, but all new buyers, I can't stress enough how important that lease negotiation is in the process.
And I'll add, and that's great, Mark. And yeah, the poll results were pretty interesting. Lots, 81% with leases, 22% looking to sell within the next few years, and certainly looking through. I've just popped up an exit poll as well. So, if this is sort of scratched an itch, if you will, question five, if you'd like some more information from Henny, if you'd like to set up a call with him or a member of his team just to talk through some of this in more detail. Question number five. If you'd like to hear from Mark and his coaching, as well as some more information about the Dental Advisory Board, including the upcoming second annual Dental Advisory Board Cars and Coffee show, which Hanny will
There we
definitely be
go.
attending this year. Feel free to click yes for number six. And then certainly again from a tons of questions these days about what is in my lease. Gosh, I can't tell you what's in it. I don't know what's hidden in it. I don't know how it compares to market rent or demographics for number four as well. we'll open it up to some Q&A. So, Mark, Dr. B is, can you briefly describe again the DSO model and what they're looking for today? Meaning, the corporate entities, the rumors were originally, gosh, you're going to sell, but you're going to work for them for the rest of your life. They're going to lock in for 5 years. If you want a higher valuation, you're going to have to guarantee the production and profits in the future, and or you're going to get a ton of stock, and God knows what the stock is going to be worth afterwards. Mark, can you
Mhm.
share a little bit about what the sale process looks like to a DSO today?
You have described the way it was probably 10 years ago because it did fall into that model and that structure. The DSO model has become a lot more flexible as well now. They're looking at even if there's new partners coming on, they're looking at de novo partners now, people that are looking to enter into the space and they want to invest as a partner with the DSO. The exit strategies are different as well. Like I said earlier, the multiples, I don't think we'll ever see the pre and post COVID multiples of 12, but they've now jumped into that 8 times EBITDA value of a clinic. And I think the the DSOs now, especially the large ones, are really trying to look at true partnership models as opposed to holding you hostage for the 3 to 5 years. They're making it very attractive with multiple different buy-in strategy. So it's not just one size fits all anymore. These things can be negotiated depending on the clinic, depending on your commitment and what your exit strategy looks like. And just to a point from earlier about the specialty clinics, if a specialist is looking to exit and turn the management and the ownership over to the DSO, and they're willing to invest a length of time, or there's a number of associates within that clinic that are looking to perhaps invest in the DSO as well and buy shares, they're more apt. But if it was just to be the one and done sale from a specialist, they're not there yet.
Got it.
I just want to add,
Yeah,
sorry, one
Henny,
thing.
anything else to add on the corporate side?
So, exactly what Mark said, negotiate, because we're seeing a lot more dentists actually have these arrangements where they're like, we'll have 20% and we'll have X amount, and like you can negotiate the service agreement. We've seen structures where it's like, okay, if we hit a certain threshold, then we go from like 40% to 60%. We've seen things where you can negotiate where like, okay, if I don't want to work after 3 years, I don't have to sell it to you right away. So make sure one, you review it and don't be afraid to ask and negotiate. That's the other thing I really just want to stress.
Yeah, perfect. We've answered those two questions live. Just being mindful of time. Final words of wisdom, Mark. I'll kick it to you first, right? For the doctor that is mid to later career, right? As they walk into the clinic tomorrow, we can either say, ah, gosh, I'll just figure it out when I get there. But what would be the one thing you would advise that doctor to do to take action as they walked in to the clinic tomorrow morning?
I think everybody's heard it before. I don't know if everyone's taken it seriously, but have an exit strategy. Go into every business with an exit strategy and what's that going to look like. You don't have to know verbatim, but there's enough professionals around that can provide you the answers you need to properly prepare you for a profitable exit, whether it be by happenstance and something tragic occurs in your life, or whether you're looking to grandfather out over a certain period of time. Make sure that all the ducks are in a row, the dominoes are lined up so that when you're ready to leave, you've put all those precautions in place. The production is where it needs to be. You're in the right place in your life and in your stage of commitment to your business that you're ready to transition out as well.
Perfect. Henny, final word to you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say be organized. And if you're not organized, have your assistant, office manager organize all the files, because as soon as we begin the work, we've seen deals are so smooth when we have everything.
Mhm.
Everything is just perfectly organized. Everyone has their HARP reports, they have their minute books, they've spoken to their accountant. And if again, just in the spirit of the consults, if anyone here wants a complimentary consultation, just give us a call. The number's on the website, and someone will book an appointment with you with as just a complimentary call if you have any questions.
I think that that goes for same with us. If you're looking to buy or sell, wherever you are on that timeline, we're happy to have that conversation, just so that you're more comfortable and that you're aware of all the different services within Dental Advisory Board that can help you along that journey.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Gentlemen, can't thank you enough for all our attendees tonight. Thank you so much. Great to see some familiar faces and names and some new ones as well. Truly appreciate everyone's time. Again, all CEs will be processed about 10 business days afterwards. You're not alone in all of this. There are some fantastic resources, can take a ton of the stress away very confidentially. Just because you're having an initial conversation doesn't mean that you're going to sell tomorrow or that the world's going to know, right? But the earlier you can help create a great plan, the better. And truly appreciate each of you for your time and have a, fantastic evening, everybody.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eric, for hosting.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, guys. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye now.